The next chapter centers on Six Sigma. We'll first discuss the evolution of quality, including how both Six Sigma and Lean emerged. We'll also review initial quality programs and certifications like ISO 9000 and TQM. And next, we'll demystify Six Sigma, including its aim at perfection. And then finally, we'll overview the costs and impacts of quality. So be sure to check D2L for the updated learning objectives for your quiz prep. Let's first discuss the history of quality. And as you'll see, this history is mostly recent, over the last, say, 50 years or so. To start, Walter Shewhart from Bell Labs is credited as one of the early pioneers of quality. He developed the statistics of quality, including the focus on variability. Back then, he recommended a 3 sigma level of quality, and we'll see what that means later in the chapter. He also developed control charts, which are an important tool for statistical process control, SPC, that are still in use today. And we'll actually dig into control charts in a later chapter. Shewhart provided the foundation for Dr. W. Edwards Deming, who's largely considered the primary crusader of the quality movement as we know it today. Deming extended Shewhart's Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, PDCA, though he preferred the Plan, Do, Study, Act adaptation. Regardless, this provided a foundation for DMAIC in Six Sigma that we'll learn later in the chapter. He also developed his famous 14 points, and these seem rather rudimentary and straightforward today. However, they were groundbreaking at the time when most organizations were not embracing quality. Let's consider a few of his 14 points. The first idea is to adopt the new philosophy, which urged organizations to embrace quality and continuous improvement over the traditional short-term focus on cost. And this was a major change in mindset at that time. And then next, improve constantly and forever. That's the focus on continuous improvement that we saw in the last chapter. Again, this is a key tenet of all quality programs. We can always improve. Next, drive out fear. Now that's an interesting idea. So suppose a frontline worker comes forward to identify a problem, whether it's created by them or it's inherent to the existing process. So this person could be seen as a complainer, a troublemaker who could face punishment from leadership. Instead, Deming supported a secure environment in which all employees were able to bring awareness to ideas and issues without fear. In contrast, fear suppresses continuous improvement, creativity, and teamwork. His point about putting everybody to work to accomplishing the transformation reflects the idea of total involvement that we saw in the last chapter. Everyone has a role in improving quality. Management sets the quality culture and they provide resources, but frontline workers usually have the most insight into improvements and will also implement the new ideas. So this was a shift from a top-down approach where all ideas come from leadership. But Deming's quality focus was largely not embraced by American organizations. However, Japanese organizations were very interested. So to put this in perspective, the U.S. had helped the Allies defeat Germany and Japan in World War II, which ended in 1945. Deming visited Japan in 1946 after the war, serving as a statistician for the U.S. government. Japanese engineers who were familiar with Deming's work invited him to offer training on statistical process control, and they eventually named their highest quality award after him. With this momentum, the 1950s saw the foundations of lean at Toyota with Taiichi Ohno, Shigeo Shingo, and others. They actually credit Deming and Henry Ford with the foundations of their quality approach, which focus on removing waste. We'll detail this lean idea, the Toyota Production System, or TPS, in a later chapter. Though let's overview a few of the key ideas now, though. So, number one is zero defects. The ultimate goal of quality is perfection. And then number two, continuous improvement. Organizations can always improve processes and quality. Number three, learning organization. Quality and continuous improvement require lifelong learning. Number four, long-term view. Quality requires a long-term focus on improving value for the customer. And then number five, respect for people. Lean extends total involvement to focus on ideas from everyone in the organization. Respect for people. Again, Japanese organizations initially embraced Deming's ideas about quality, but the Americans did not. And for perspective, the US had just won World War II on two fronts, Europe and Asia, largely through both our fighting forces and manufacturing arms for us and our allies. We literally outproduced Germany and Japan. So there was no better manufacturer in the 1940s than the USA. So these American producers were caught in the competency trap in which they became blinded by their success. They were resistant to new ideas like Deming's quality focus. And after World War II, Japan was actually known for cheap, low-quality products. Made in Japan back then meant cheap. In fact, when Sony, which emerged from the ashes of World War II, literally, when they first started to export their electronics, they printed "Made in Japan" in extremely small lettering. It was a mark of shame. It took several decades, but Japan's quality focus eventually bore fruit. By the 1970s, Made in Japan began to hold status as high quality, particularly with electronics like Sony and automobiles like Toyota and Honda. Then by the 1980s, the disparity between American and Japanese quality was highly evident to US consumers. Japanese cars, for instance, required less maintenance, achieved higher fuel efficiency, and cost less, despite being produced 5,000 miles away. So how could a country that we beat in a war overtake US manufacturing? Made in Japan used to mean cheap, now it meant high quality. Here's a quick funny scene from the movie Back to the Future 2 with Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. So here, Doc Brown, who was stuck in the 1950s, moves forward to the 1980s and learns of the quality transformation by Japan.
Unbelievable that this little piece of junk could be such a big problem. No wonder this circuit failed. It says "Made in Japan."
What do you mean, Doc? All the best stuff is made in Japan.
Unbelievable.
All the best stuff is made in Japan. That was the view in the 1980s. And to digress a bit, realize that made in China also used to be a badge of shame. It meant cheap. And they still do have some low-cost producers, but their overall manufacturing capabilities today largely rival the US. But back to the 1980s and the quality challenge from Japan. US manufacturers had to respond. They had to embrace Deming's focus on quality, though they were already several decades behind. So in the 1980s, the US finally began to embrace quality with the Malcolm Baldrige Award and the ISO 9000 certification, both of which we'll see later in this chapter. And then TQM, Total Quality Management, emerged as the first major quality program in the US, again in the 1980s. And we saw TQM in the last chapter as a precursor to Six Sigma. Six Sigma was also developed in the 1980s, and this was work at Motorola by Bill Smith, Bob Galvin, and Michael Harry. But it did take a while for Six Sigma to become mainstream, particularly compared to TQM. And as we'll see later in this chapter, Six Sigma focuses on reducing variability to reduce defects and accordingly improve quality. And Six Sigma is so detailed that it measures defects per million opportunities, DPMO. And the Six Sigma approach to process improvement applies DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And we'll see both of these ideas later in this chapter as well. Michael Harry then moved on to other companies such as ABB and Honeywell to further Six Sigma, including incorporating financial tactics to better highlight the positive impacts. He also trained corporate executives in Six Sigma methods. And then one key additional Six Sigma champion was Jack Welch at General Electric. And he really popularized Six Sigma, helping it to become more mainstream. And he also focused on linking quality to employee rewards to inspire continuous improvement. Now, that was a lot of detail, but let's highlight a few key ideas. Number one, Deming, the OG quality champion, emerged in the US before World War II. However, number two, American organizations did not initially embrace his ideas, but the Japanese did. So number three, by the 1980s, Japanese quality had surpassed that of the US, and this served as a wake-up call for US manufacturing. Leading us to number four, the US then began to embrace quality in the 1980s, but it's taken decades for them to catch up. Think about it today. Would you really rather buy an American car over a Japanese one? American car companies have made great progress with their quality. Arguably, however, they still lag a bit behind the Japanese.